And
hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. I am thrilled to have Kortney Wilson joining us today, all the way from Nashville. Kortney, thanks for joining us.
thank you so much for having me.
Well,
Truly.
we're thrilled to have you. And I know we have a lot to talk about. Before we get there, audience, thank you. I know you have a choice as to where you chime in, and we're thrilled that we're now being listened to in 44 different countries. So thank you. Keep listening, keep sharing with us what you like hearing, what you don't like hearing. We want to hear it all. So thank you for that. So let's talk about Kortney a little bit. Let me give you her full bio.
Well, here we go.
Yep. It's a good one too. So just hang tight for a second. So Kortney is the lead designer of HGTV's Making It Home and the Canadian Screen Awards nominated Masters of Flip. I think that's when I started really watching you in the beginning, Kortney. So thrilled to get to have you here today. She is truly known for bringing her creative vision to each of the renovations that she does. And she is not afraid to go bold with her design choices and transform a space from being really unremarkable to something that's highly inspiring. But that's not all Kortney's known for. She's also very passionate about adoption and the arts, and specifically dedicates a lot of her time to advocating for those who can't advocate for themselves. She has a philosophy and belief that all kids should have a safe space and place to express themselves, food on their table, clothes on their back while they're getting educated. And unfortunately, these things they don't come easily for everybody. So you're doing some great work in that area, Kortney, and we'll come back and talk about that a little bit. But now let's just flip forward 19 years in. Kortney has flipped over 160 houses, which is unbelievable, and has been leading a force in revitalizing East Nashville, Tennessee into this hugely desirable neighborhood that it is today. She credits her success as a realtor, a TV host, an author, and an entrepreneur. She's also the creator of home decor line, Kort Co, to her biggest accomplishment being a mom to 3 children and learning to juggle life one day at a time. Kortney, wow. Pretty cool when you hear that about yourself, right?
I face that a little bit because it's hard. It's hard to hear some of these things. And I didn't write that because I think it's really hard to write a bio about yourself. Because I'd just be like, I'm just an everyday girl, which is how I usually feel. But yeah, the only part that super rang true for me was the mom part. It is literally my biggest accomplishment. The hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. All the other stuff was just like, cool.
Sort of icing on the cake. Well, being a mom is not easy. That's for sure. And I know we have a lot of moms listening to our call.
Oh, yeah.
And your journey has been one of a lot of resilience and reinvention. And that's why I was so excited to have you on the call today is to, really kind of take us on this journey of, living in Sudbury, Canada, where you were sort of born and raised, and how you got to Nashville. Like, give us the story on what happened.
Yeah, I had a great upbringing. Living in Ontario, Canada, several different places, born in Windsor, moved to Sudbury, lived there until I was 13, and then to Southern Ontario, closer to Toronto, just outside in a place called Kitchener-Waterloo. But I always knew, like when I think back to my childhood, I was never worried about growing up. I always knew that there was something there for me. Like I knew that I wanted to be a singer. And I laugh about that now because, growing up, we always say, what do you want to do? Nobody ever actually ends up doing what they wanted to do per se, right? Like specifically. And if we do, it typically evolves. We pivot, we learn to pivot. So pivot has been the name of my game, basically in my life. But I knew that I wanted to be a singer, and that grounded my childhood. I spent a lot of time recording. I had the support of my family. We would go to competitions. I grew up in a hockey family, so it was either a recording studio or a hockey arena. Yeah. And when I was 16, I won a singing competition at a fair of all places in London, Ontario.
Okay.
And this this professor took me aside after I won the competition. And this was like a big deal. All the fairs in Ontario, you all have like a regional winner, and then you get on the big stage, and you go to the North American competition, which I can't remember, was in Memphis or something. So he took me aside after I won that night. It was a really big deal. And he said, listen, a racehorse must run. And I kind of looked at him, and I was a super intuitive kid too. Like I was like, whatever you said to me, I like, from the beginning of time, a beginning of me, I was always dissecting it and pulling it apart and trying to figure out what people meant. So I was like, a racehorse must run, but he didn't really elaborate. He just said that. So, and he said, and if you ever decide to go to Nashville, which is where you need to be, call me. Well, about a year and a half later, year and a half later, I called him, and I drove an hour and a half. I went and had coffee with him, and he was a professor at a music college there, Fanshawe. And I said, you said a racehorse must run, and I get it now. I said, if I stay here, I'll be held back. I have to go. And he said, when you get to Nashville, look this guy up. So I did. About a couple months later, I sat my parents in a living room, and I said, I'm going to move to Nashville in January, right now. And they were like, can you wait until January? They just weren't sure that I was ready. They were very leery about letting their child go to another country.
Of course.
And they said, if you wait till January or February, mom can go with you. So my mom went there, and within 48 hours of being here, I had parked myself on a couch from the guy, the professor. They'd given me a name, and this guy answered the door, who turned out to be my first husband. His name's Dave. And within the woman that owned the house was an artist, writer, and she painted on the side to support her, what we say, to support our habits of songwriting in Nashville, Tennessee. And she was listening to my demo tape, and she said, I'm going to play this for somebody. And she came back a couple of days later, and she said, I played it for this entertainment lawyer. I was painting his office, and he wants to see you in his office tomorrow. And I went to his office that morning, and by the end of the day, I had a publishing deal, a management contract, and I was sitting in front of Reba McEntire's producer.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, sing for me. And I was like, what? He goes, you said you could sing for me. And those are that's the rawness of Nashville. And so I did. I sang a cappella, and he said, so I just have one question for you. And I was like, this is very Hollywood. I said, what's that? He said, what are you going to do with all your money?
Oh.
And again, it gave me all these feels like, oh my gosh, I'm on my way. This is a dream. And I signed a record deal with Disney Lyric Street a couple months later, and I was on my way. And I always say that was the beginning of the end of my music career. It was awesome. It was so Hollywood. I shot a big budget video in LA, and went on a massive radio tour and met everybody. And waited forever for my record to come out, and I just couldn't wait anymore. It was 4 years later, and it's a long story, but basically I had worked radio for 6 months. I was the most added artist, and one big radio station said, you know what, we're not going to play her because she's female. That was the gist of it. They didn't say gender, but they wanted another male artist from this record label. So they pulled my record, and they played, and they signed another act called Rascal Flatts.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And Rascal Flatts took off, and then they sent another male artist out the way, and all of these artists, and I was like, I'm out. So I asked for release, and I was getting ready to get signed by another big major label. And I had a few last shows to do. And one of them was at the World Trade Center. And it was between the two towers, and I was opening up for Rascal Flatts. Our buses parked there. We drove through the night, parked there at 7:30 in the morning. We had a show there during their lunch hour. It was their music country summer jam series. And 4 days later, the towers went down. Yeah. And that everybody's world had changed. It wasn't just mine. It was everybody's. In that moment, I knew that the guy that was the head of the record label called me that day, and he said, I can't sign you, right? And I said, I'm aware. We just knew. And so I had to pivot. girl, I had to pivot in a big way. So I did. A friend was looking for somebody to run a music like fan club.
Hmm.
And my husband at the time thought it was beneath me. They actually asked him and they said, well, do you think Kortney's interested? And he said, I doubt it. He got off the phone. I said, oh my gosh, I am. Because I want to learn everything behind the scenes that I possibly can. Because if I get another opportunity, I'm going to get there. And so I took the job and I started running the fan clubs for Toby Keith and Brad Paisley and Lady Antebellum and all the people. And just could never, had another record deal in and out. But anyway, bottom line is that I had a gazillion jobs. I ended up, everything was connected in some way, one way or another to get me where I am today.
What I was going to say. Yes.
Yeah. Music just never took off in that same way, even though I had 2 more record deals, one, both with my husband as a duo, my ex-husband now. And one day I just was like, I was depressed. I had 3 kids. I had 3 kids and I was extremely depressed. And I thought, if I put half this energy into anything else, I will see it come to fruition and I will see it pay dividends. And my heart, even though my heart was in music, there were other things that I couldn't deny. I wanted a more steady paycheck. I wanted to travel. I wanted to be able to give my kids things. I didn't want to have to take them on the road. And so I went and got my real estate license.
Amazing.
It was the only thing that I could think to do without a college education. And so I went and I took the courses, and every day on the way there, I would cry. And every day on the way back, I would cry.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, I did. But I knew I had to push through that feeling. It didn't feel like me. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be a realtor at the time, but there was something inside of me that was like, no matter whether I'm supposed to be a realtor or not, I have to take a step right now in a direction. And I think that's really key to my life. I think we can overanalyze everything and we can say, well, this isn't what I meant to do, or this isn't what I want to do. But while we're doing that, while we're trying to figure our shit out, so to speak.
No kidding.
I always somehow, the gift that I had was to just take a step forward. Take any step forward.
Exactly. And you've shared a few things already that really speaks to who you are as a person. Like you've got that tenacity and you're highly resilient and being able to pivot and see, even knowing what you just said, like you knew realtor wasn't the be all end all of all of what you wanted to do and be, but it was a stepping stone to land you where you are today. Right.
Yeah.
And that's having the courage, having that grit to be able to stay focused on your goals and what's possible. Mm-hmm. That's incredible, like incredible. And so many of us give up, right? And you're not.
I think there's a lot of pressure, right? There's a lot of pressure on people to choose this hat that they put on that is supposed to tell them exactly who they are and what they love. This is their career and this is what they stand for. And that just doesn't exist.
It does not. You are absolutely correct.
Yeah. Maybe, in the B movie, but not for us, right? Like not in real life. I put on this hat and I'm a mom, and I put this hat on and I'm an entrepreneur, and I put this hat on and I might even be a little depressed, and I put this hat on and I'm resilient. Like we are all of these things.
Yes.
And I think once I realized that I didn't, music was a big thing for me because I felt a lot of guilt giving it up, and it wasn't for myself. I actually had to do a lot of therapy on this one. So listen, ladies, I can save you $10,000 right now. I was giving it up and I was okay with it, but I felt an immense responsibility to my family, to my mom specifically.
Sure.
There was this messaging growing up, and each generation is working on it, right? Like we've learned so much generation to generation. But back then it was like, you're going to do great things. You're going to be a superstar. You're going to be amazing. Just wait till everybody sees you. And it was like, I felt sometimes like a dancing clown.
Sure.
And I didn't want to disappoint anybody. because, people had given things up for me. They had given up their weekends to take me to a thing or a competition and paid for studio time. And there was this responsibility I felt to everybody. And it wasn't that music wasn't a part of my soul. To this day, it still is. I drove that. I loved it. But at some point, I had to acknowledge that it was okay to love other things. It was actually okay to like money.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, I grew up kind of like thinking money was bad. We didn't have a lot of money. So it was like, money's not going to make you happy. And it doesn't. But money buys you freedom. Money buys you, an opportunity to experience things in life. And I wanted that. That was important to me. It's not important to everybody, but it was important to me because the greatest education in my mind was travel and things like that.
Yeah. Yes. So with you on that.
Yeah. So
you can't replace that.
Can't replace it. And so and as my kids were growing up, and we all know it happens just like that, so fast.
It does.
I didn't want to eat beans and rice forever. Yeah. And there were times when it was really hard. And I learned so many things from those. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Having to eat beans and rice and, be really careful about where every dollar's going. It's invaluable to I think my greatest qualities today.
Well, sure. It builds your character, right? It also aligns your values of what's important to you. And one thing you had shared with me before was just that importance of being a mother, right? And the courage it takes to be able to discipline, to be able to nurture, but also always doing it with grace. And so maybe talk about that a little bit, because adoption has been very important to you and advocating for others. So maybe share some of that part of your journey.
Yeah. So I always wanted to adopt. That again was something else that I think things get planted in us as we grow, as we're children. And some of us really listen to them and some of us kind of just go, that was when I was a kid. But when I was a child, I was presented a situation where people were talking about adoption. I was like, that sounds great. And it never was out of my head at any point. So even on our first date, like my first date with my first husband, I said, hey, listen, I'm going to adopt a baby someday. If this is a problem for you, like, you might as well let me know.
Let's move on.
I mean, he just wanted to get laid. He was like, okay, that's fine. So we, right after Sally was born, my second boy, he came home and the adoption papers were there. So I was still breastfeeding Sally. He was 3 months old. And I said, well, this could take a long time. So we need to start now. He's like, kidding me? And it did. We had a failed adoption. One of the saddest days of my entire life, was the day before what I thought was going to be my adoptive daughter being born, and the birth mother had changed her mind. And man, I go back to that day with so many emotions because I was in such pain, right? Like I was in such pain. And I also, as I'm thinking about saying this, I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to judge me. But I grabbed a camera. Now, this is before I had a TV show. This is before anything. And I sat in the nursery and I put it in front of me and I just started speaking all the things that I was thinking. And part of that actually ended up in a TV show later on called Meet the Wilsons, because we were adopting Lennox and it was talking about my pain. And I don't know to this day why I did it. But I think it was because I knew from my life that this moment would be turned upside down and I would be on the other side of this grief and sadness. And when it was, I wanted to remember what it felt like. But when Lennox was born, it was clear. I would have thanked the first birth mother because Lennox was always supposed to be my daughter.
Aww.
And so it all played out exactly the way that it was supposed to. Not to be confused with me saying everything is meant to be. I actually don't say that. I think a lot of things happen for a reason and that there's something to learn from everything. But I've never gravitated to that saying. My mom used it growing up and I was just like, I've seen too many awful things. I've seen children raped in other countries. And at, 6 months old, and terrible things that happen in this world that just cannot be explained to me. But there's a lesson in everything. And the lesson for me with that is, time does heal. And Lennox is the greatest gift in my life.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things I hear you, when I was listening to what you just said, we all do go through a lot of things. Like, we all have a story, right? But we have a choice as to how we navigate that story. And what I just heard you sharing is recognizing that in that particular situation, as horrible as it was, it probably brought a lot of joy to that mother keeping her baby. And it allowed you to have Lennox, right? Which has been a beautiful experience. So you could have played the victim role in that situation, but instead you've risen above that and had the grace to see how beautiful it is.
Yeah, for sure. I have so many things. I could speak for hours just on, this and victim mentality and all of the things. But the bottom line is that I knew I was supposed to adopt. That was inside of me. Lennox is here. She's amazing. She is as connected to me. We actually joked with the boy. I'm more connected to her.
It's the girl gene.
And parenting for sure. Parenting 3 kids, 2 of them that came out of my body and 1 of them that didn't. All 3 of them are absolutely unique in every way. It's like they need 3 different types of parent from me.
Yeah.
And that, I would say that navigating that post-divorce might be my biggest life challenge to date. I am a very consistent parent, and consistency, when you are with somebody, you sort of balance each other out, and it ebbs and flows. And when you don't have that, and you part ways with somebody where it's not working, it's typically also not working in the parenting, right? So
yes,
that was a really hard thing for me to get through. And it's actually still a hard thing. Though I have more custody now, we'll say, of the 2 minors. So it's easier now. But my oldest really struggled. He was caught in the middle, and I had to show some serious consistency with him and make some really hard decisions. And I won't be talking about those specific things that I had to do, but very hard things.
absolutely.
I know, privately, are my friends, if I said that, they'd all go, "Oh my gosh." All I can say is consistency pays off. And there was a moment when I thought, there is no way that my oldest is ever going to speak to me, because I wasn't his friend, right? I was his parent. And I was making some hard calls on his behalf. And he said, "I will speak to you." He didn't mix words. "I hate you." And, I'm going to Boston in 2 days. I've furnished he's just moved to Boston, and he's flying high and all the things. And he wrote me a letter last Christmas and said, "Mom, you saved my life."
Oh, Kortney.
Yeah. And
beautiful.
And one day that child's going to write a book. I know it. I feel it in my heart. He has so many things to say and share, and he's so wise beyond his years now. And then, my middle child is a surprise every day what I'm going to get with him. He's hilarious and fun, and I parent him in a different way. He's way more sensitive.
Yeah.
And then Lennox is my wild card. So parenting her has been, do I dare say, the easiest in a lot of ways. But there's still a lot more time.
Yeah. Well, and something you just shared there, I think, is such an important message for our audience to take to heart, because what you just shared applies not only as a parent, but also as a leader in your life, right? You can't just be with other people and expect everybody's going to be exactly the same, because we're not. We're all unique. We're all different. And so to have those really profound and solid relationships, it's learning how to be with that person as that person is, and vice versa, right? Because you're
Yeah.
also,
And also, like, I know there are moms out there listening, and I can do a TikTok with my kids and I'll see comments saying, "Oh my God, you guys are the best together and you're amazing." And you know what? On that day we are. It was amazing, or it was really fun. But I am no different than everybody else. Navigating it is so hard. I have had days where I thought I just can't do this anymore. Like I know that I can, but I'm just exhausted mentally and physically, and I want to shut down. So like I sympathize with people who are trying to do this, especially on your own, right? Like especially in a post-divorce situation, that was just way harder. I couldn't, I don't want to use the word control the other side, but I couldn't, like, as a mom, we wear so many hats that we're able to sort of manipulate situations to get our kids what they need.
yep.
And I don't mean that, I mean, like, like reverse psychology on the children, or even your husband for that matter, and you can say, well, you know what, you can make it feel like somebody else's idea, to say, hey, don't you think, or can we talk this out? When you don't have somebody right there where you can work through those things, it's been exhausting.
It is exhausting. Yes. And if you look at divorce rate in North America, I mean, we're at 60%, right? So you have a lot of single parents, and that co-parenting is not an easy task, to your point.
Oh.
And sometimes being that best friend does more bad than good. It's more detrimental.
Well, it's easier. I mean,
it is easier, but not in the long run.
To say like, hey, here, you want it? Awesome. Great. Oh, you don't want to do this? Don't worry. Or it's definitely easier, but it doesn't work. I don't think it works.
No, it doesn't. I agree.
I think of like parenthood as this clock. I always say to my kids, and each one I'm trying to tick off, like, another box for them by the time they leave the nest. So it's not enough that, you're just really good in school.
Yeah.
That's also, or you can make money, or you can, empathy and sympathy and all these things about that's my job. I need to teach you how to be a well-rounded human being. Yeah. And then I throw you to the wolves.
And hope you remember everything I've taught you.
I drop you out of the nest and bye. And it's so cool now to see some of those things pay off. But man, it's hard. Yeah.
It is hard. But Kortney, what I would say also, you're modeling for your kids how to be that good person in society, how to have those values. And even when you're tough, it doesn't mean you don't love, right? And you've taught your kids how to pivot, how to have that agility, because even if you look at the story you've shared with us today about, the loss of the first baby you were adopting, you wanted this singing career, and then you've been able to pivot that. You went into real estate. Now you've pivoted to this really well-known, HGTV movie, or I was going to say movie personality, TV personality. Yes, movie deal next. Anybody listening? But not just that, like, you've been able to diversify in a way, because Kort Co, like, you've got your own beautiful furniture line and linens, like, you've done all this beautiful creative work, and what you're doing is modeling that for your family, for your kids to see you can be whatever you set your mind to. Doesn't mean it's easy.
I used to have a sign in my house. I when I moved into this place, I took it down, but it says, you can't have it all at once.
Yeah.
I grew up, it's like, you can have anything you want to be. You're going to be anything you want to be. Well, in some ways, I believe that to be true. Mm-hmm. And in other ways, I'm like, well, you can't, you have to know who you are first. Yeah. I'm not going to suggest that my 14-year-old be an astrophysicist, because she doesn't really love to read. We might, go, hey, what are the things that really speak to you? So in that way, I say, yes, you can be anything that you really want to be, but you can't have it all at once. I cannot be a stay-at-home mother and a working mother at the same time.
Yeah.
And because I can't do both of those things at the same time, something has to give.
Yeah.
And maybe because I'm a stay-at-home mother, my kids learn, how to cook with me, and, things, maybe I'm an amazing travel coordinator, and they see this like super strong personality within the household. And that's amazing, right? But they're not going to see me having to pivot in the way that I have, being the primary caregiver and breadwinner.
Yeah.
So it's a trade-off. I regret not taking more time after my first child was born. I'm in the US. We don't get a maternity leave. I was the breadwinner, and I had to go back to work, and I had to go back to work fast. It was in the first month, because we couldn't afford not to. And I regret that. I wish that I had been able to stay home. I wish that I had found a way. I don't know how. I wish that I had found a way. And so I just think, like, it's so easy for us to say, well, you can have it all. But again, there's so much pressure that comes with that, because then we feel like a failure when we can't figure it out.
Yeah.
And I have not been able to figure it all out. I haven't been able to figure out how to stay home and provide. Some people figure that out, and that's awesome. Kudos to y'all. That's amazing. So yeah, I think we're all winners in different ways,
Exactly.
And I think,
yes.
I think that's really important for all of us to embrace. And again, I'm not of that culture of like, we have to celebrate all the stay-at-home moms. Of course we do. It's the hardest job in the dang world. People who are doing that are idiots and morons, right? But taking a step further, we have to just celebrate being able to figure it out, put food on the table, and go to the college meeting and the dentist appointment, without losing our sanity.
Our sanity and our own identity. Like you yeah, you talked about that earlier, and that's, I did something on social media recently talking about the mask, right? The mask we wear, and being able to recognize when we are wearing the mask. That's such an important part, because you're all of those things. You're not just one. And at the core, it's about who you are and bringing your fullness to what you're doing, whether it be at, Kortney Co, or whether it be on HGTV, or whether it be as a mom.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Every year, just before New Year's, I do a goal, I'm very goal oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So I write something, I write my goals for the future year to come. And then I also write a thing about where I've been in this last year, and who I am, and what I'd like to change. And I do it, and I put it in writing, and I send it to myself.
Nice.
And throughout the year, I read it. Like, what did I not love? What would I like to, patience has been a big thing. Like, I have to show more patience. I sometimes have this mentality of, I can do it quicker and just get it done. Right. But then from that, I learned that I wasn't very trusting of other people. So I really worked on myself. And now I kind of actually, like, if I haven't seen anybody in a long time, like in 10 years or 15 years, and they're like, oh, you're like that, I kind of almost resent that, because I've done the work to not be that anymore. And I learned to do that through a lot of therapy and counseling, especially when we went to marriage counseling. Like, how do I not compromise who I am and also grow? You can do those things simultaneously.
Yes.
Not, and go, well, I've never, you're right, I don't really love that about myself. Just because I wasn't, I might have been born that way. It might be one of my characteristics or traits, but like, maybe I don't
stay there. Yeah. And you don't have to stay there. You can change that. And so you've been doing that work, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And you just because I know I'm cognizant of our time, and I know you've got a million things to do. One thing that I do want to really highlight with the audience is, listen to what Kortney has been sharing and some of those challenges that she has faced in life. And, even when you have setbacks, there can be that silver lining or the possibility. So you got Lennox, which is, just beautiful to your heart. And, you and Dave split up, and that opened up a space for you because you just recently got remarried, which is amazing. And, to an incredible man from what you've shared. And so the big thing, I guess, is, for our audience to think about is that even though today could look dark, tomorrow can be bright, but you do have to do the work. And you've said that so gracefully. So thank you for that.
Well, I mean, you can be a victim, right? You can, a friend of mine said, you got divorced at the same time as so-and-so, and you're about to be remarried. And this person is still telling us the same stories over and over. It's the same problems. I would say if you're dealing with the same problems every day, you're doing something wrong. You might be dealing with problems for the rest of your life. You probably will be. I'm just dealing with new problems, right? Like I'm solving those ones and growing and moving. And that has also included having boundaries in my life. I have to share this one thing because it just feels like your audience might like it, but about boundaries. But I was at this church with my friend one day. I'm in the middle of the divorce, and her husband plays in the band, and Nashville church bands are insane. Like they played, it was the Saturday night vigil, and they played Staying Alive.
Oh, wow. Okay. Fun, up to date.
Yes, the pastor got on stage, and it's a very big grand church. And he got on stage, and he was like talking about forgiveness and forgiving and forgetting and all these things. And he's like, I want you to forgive. He's like, but that doesn't mean you invite them over for a ham sandwich and a coffee, right? Like that's stupid. Set your boundary and earn that trust back if it can even be earned back. Some things are just left to be over there. And that it's not a wall, it's just a boundary. It's like, I learned my lesson. Nice. I'm not going to keep walking into that same problem. And again, we as women were grown up to just forgive everybody. And forgiveness for me meant you let everybody back into your circle again. It's forgotten, good. And so as I'm getting older, I'm recognizing that, in order to move forward, you have to make changes.
Sure.
And you have to have boundaries, and you have to be able to say, I forgive. I'm forgiving for me first so that I can let it go. Forgiveness is a gift to yourself, because then you literally can let it go, and you let it go knowing that they did, whomever, your issue is with, did the very best that they could. And if we operate under the pretense that everybody's doing the very best that they can in any given moment, it's easier to show grace. Doesn't mean their best is going to work for my circle.
Yes. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. That was probably exactly what the audience needed to hear. So thank you for that. I think that rings true for a lot of reasons. And so beautifully said, because it is about forgiveness for ourselves. And then you decide how much space you want to allow them to take up. You're in control of that. You don't have to let them take any space.
And when you forgive, you no longer have to spend your energy trying to hurt anybody. There's no revenge. There's nothing that happens, right? So all your energy can be moved to something that you care about, that you want, a goal, a person.
Possibilities of the future.
The possibilities, the amount of energy. If I had a nickel for every time, okay, maybe $1 in this day and age, but if I had $1 for every time somebody said something negative on one of my posts, I would be a gazillionaire. I can't tell you. And the first thing that comes to mind is, this is so sad that they're spending their energy on me. They've never met me, and they're going to spend the only energy they have in this day to say something to put me down. Yeah. Like, what are you winning from that? I know they're not winning in that situation. They're not. Also, doesn't mean it doesn't affect me. Yeah. So not to be confused that I'm a robot. I'm not going around like this with like a shield. I'm not a robot. You're so on a bad day, I can lose my, blippity blip because I'm hurt by that. Yeah. It's not where I want to spend my energy either. So anyway.
I think that's an important way for us to wrap up our conversation today, because it goes back to the choice that we were talking about earlier, right? You have a choice of how you show up. If you want to, first thing you say is negative, like you can be equally as intentional in sharing something positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you read something that triggers you, ask yourself why it triggers you.
Right.
Right? Like, what's going on with me that upset me that Kortney posted this or said this? Like, that's where you do some of that work, right? And start to really identify.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's like when I go to Ethiopia and I'm trying to feed starving children, somebody will post something to the effect of, really? Because she has, she just threw herself a wedding, and she, how many starving children she could feed with that wedding. I'm just like, oh my
But apples to apples. How about Kortney? You looked beautiful in your gown, and the festivities look so
it doesn't
amazing.
make sense, right? Like, to take something good and turn it, like, it just doesn't make sense. And typically the person that will say that is also the person that isn't doing anything.
Correct.
It's almost always the case. They're not doing anything themselves. I always say to when my kids say, when somebody says, if I had $1 million, I would, I'm like, ignore everything they just said.
Yeah.
And they're like, why? I'm like, well, because you can do something now.
Yeah.
You don't have any money. You've got time. There's always something that we can do, right, for somebody else.
I love that.
It's much is given, much is expected. So that just keeps growing. But when people shout off from their soapboxes, that type of stuff, it doesn't help anybody.
It's not helpful. No. Well, I love what you just shared there. And so I would invite our audience to take that with you. And, when you catch yourself being negative or making a comment that potentially has the ability to impact somebody else in a negative way, think twice, pause, count backwards to 6, reset yourself, and find the positive, find the possibility. I love what you just shared there about, what are you doing? You're making comments, you're spending time on social media, being negative towards somebody else that you don't know. What are you doing? How are you contributing to a more positive, happy world? And if all of us did more of that, we would be in a much, much better place. Yeah. This has been amazing. Thank you. We could spend hours because there's just so much more to talk about. So we may have to have you on the show again at a later date. But you know what? I'm really grateful for your vulnerability today and sharing with people. Like, we all have stuff. We all have our thing, right? And I know you might have a podcast launching in the next little bit that
so I haven't officially announced it, but I think this actually airs after. But yes, I have it right here. Look, it shit stick of life.
Love it.
Everybody gets hit by the shit stick of life.
Just right.
With it.
What you gonna do with it?
What you gonna do about it? So it's gonna be, I want to talk to real people, whether they're trying to get by or super famous or super rich or super generous. And I want to hear their stories. I want to hear how they survived getting hit by the shit stick of life. Because I certainly was. I have been, and I've had so many great things in my life, but there have been moments that have been literally brought me to my knees, and I didn't know how I was going to get through that day. And so we're going to be talking a lot about that, but thank you so much. Yes. Wish me luck, because I'm going to need it. I know I'm supposed to do it because I'm scared. And anytime that I feel a little fearful in my life about something I'm about to take on, I know it's just where I need to be, because that's where the growth is.
Beautiful. Well, and that shows your grace as well. So thank you for that. And so audience, you heard it. You get first dibs. Kortney's going to have a new podcast coming out, so make sure you check it out. Kortney, thank you. Seriously, I'm touched. I had goosebumps several times as you were speaking today. And I'm really grateful to you for coming on and just sharing some of your bright light and, just helping people understand that we all have our stuff. It's what we do with it.
Well, hopefully if at least one listener, if we can change the world for one, it's enough.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Audience, thank you for being here. And we appreciate you chiming in today at the WIL Talk podcast. And we hope to see you again in the near future. Thank you.